Hey everyone! I'd like to borrow a little bit of everyone's time today to amplify and discuss a conversation that is necessary to have in our political climate. It is without a doubt that the United States has entered a new era of politics that fosters instability and the polarization of the nation's peoples. This has manifested itself in forms that many of us have already been exposed to. There's online petitions, public protests, riots, and the formation of organizations such as the Sunrise Movement or movements like Black Lives Matter. Now, movements against the status quo and the governing class in America are not uncommon. Citizens frequently unite under common goals and ideas. Historically speaking, we've seen this through the Zoot Suit riots of the 40s, Vietnam War protests of the 60s, and actions by the Black Panther Party in the early 70s. So, what makes today and right now different from the past? To understand the importance of these shifting tides, we must ask ourselves this: who are the faces of these movements? In a striking contrast to the Black Panther Party and many groups like it, the faces of these movements belong to America's youth. The rate at which youth gravitate toward movements today is unprecedented, resulting in swaths of young people in positions of leadership, placing themselves at the forefront of organization. I then must ask, how does the heavy concentration of youth-led organization and progressive groups impact public perception of these movements and ultimately shape that movement? I'd like to approach this by first understanding, why is this an important question to ask? Well, gaining an understanding on the role of youth's identity and its invisible hand in the construction of social movements can provide valuable insight regarding the composition of movements that bring significant social change, both historically and in a polarized future. It is difficult to examine a topic of this breadth and confidently capture all of its niche elements. To accommodate this, I plan to use the Black Lives Matter movement as an analog for progressive groups. By focusing on a single movement and organization, a localized school of knowledge is established, bringing with it a more comprehensive analysis. There also comes other benefits that support the construction of this analysis. Black Lives Matter is a contemporary group that is being frequently pushed through media channels right now. This means that as I analyze sources, whether they be scholarly or editorial pieces, the perspective and information they bring will be extremely rich in its contextual value, potentially creating research for future projects. Now that BLM has been established as a proxy group, it allows me to tackle more complex ideas and the dynamics of social movements. Public perception and a good repertoire with the masses is necessary for the success of any movement. That is why the impact youth have had is important to investigate. That being said, BLM is a multifaceted organization with invested support in a number of fields. This has resulted in a public identity that is not only constructed on the behalf of its youth component, but as well as personal biases and political leanings. To reconcile these aspects, a literature review that engages with conflicting perspectives will be conducted. Some scholarly sources are sympathetic with BLM and find comfort in its youthful composition. They cite the fact that the group possesses a unique engagement with social media and frequently organizes successful demonstrations for a number of causes. But these same qualities are interpreted differently by other academic sources. While they acknowledge that BLM has successfully utilized social media, they claim that it's a superficial platform and that the numerous demonstrations held actually represent a lack of organization and cohesion behind the group's purpose and goals. For this to be an accurate investigation of social movements, it must also be acknowledged that scholars and scientific journals cannot represent all ideas of public perception. Public perception occurs at the local and community scale as well. My hope is that a synthesis of opinion and editorial pieces from small, locally sourced journals and newspapers will aid in the understanding of the group's reception at town, county, and state levels. I'd also like to conduct interviews with members of BLM chapters across the nation. Through these interviews, I hope to gather qualitative data on the group's personal sentiment and how they feel their identity has affected them. Ideally, this will be compared with sentiment gathered from scholarly and editorial pieces earlier. So, today, it seems like the continued polarization of American politics seems inevitable. And with that will likely come the more frequent citing of protests, demonstrations, and movements. To successfully organize and understand the birth of significant movements in the future, we must take the time to analyze the contemporary organizations of today. Black Lives Matter presents us with that unique opportunity. They are very likely this decade's most impactful organization. I hope to take that opportunity and investigate BLM's climb to that position while observing how being youth-led has shaped the group's journey through public perception.